Welcome to today's podcast, all about natural bedding, which ones are good, which ones aren't, and how to spot the differences between them. I have a great guest who is an expert when it comes to natural textiles, natural beddings. He actually has the very first FDA-approved textiles or bedding company. And I'm very excited because we're going to hear all about how natural bedding can help and why this type of specific bedding material can really help make a difference in your skin. He'll also share some real life stories about how his bedding and the materials used really help to bring relief to a lot of people who are experiencing rashes. So, welcome, Michael, to the show today.
Hi, Abby. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be on the show again.
For sure. So we did actually have Michael a few years ago on the show, and since then his company has expanded. His company, if you want to look it up, it's also in the link in the description, which you can click on, is AIZOME Bedding. And I'm very excited. They are really special. As I mentioned, the very first FDA approved device for, well, quote unquote device, but it's really a bedding material. And it's helped so many people. So, can you share the story behind Izome and what inspired you to create textiles as healthcare that you can wear?
So, my story really started in 2010. My mother was diagnosed with a cancer, a terminal cancer, unfortunately, and she had to undergo chemotherapy. And during the chemotherapy treatment, she started developing like these really rashes and blue, swellings. And and we were like, and she was already like in bed, and the oncologist said, well, sometimes when the immune system is really compromised, it cannot defend against the dyes and textiles. And try swapping it out. And I remember this guy was from Berlin. He said a very thick Berlin accent, and I think like this is just some. I don't believe that. Like that cannot possibly be true that the color in textiles would cause any kind of reaction. But in truth, I never thought about color as an ingredient, as anything, or didn't even know what is color made. I mean, textile color, what is this made of? And that kind of opened sort of a rabbit hole that I'm still in. And then, basically went a few years later. I mean, I can also tell that we swapped out the sheets and like the swellings disappeared. So to me, it was like, all right, something's going on here. And a few years later, I lived in Japan, and we were, it was my first date with my girlfriend and our wife. And I said, let's go to traditional indigo dyer. And, they were like dyeing with indigo and with plants. And, we would see the whole process being happening with plants. And I just went back and thought, like, hey, when my mom had this, the issue was that all synthetic dyes are made from petrochemicals. So, meaning the same raw materials as plastic. And that's something that most people can't really wrap their head around. But the synthetic dyes in our everyday textiles and our products are made from the same ingredients that we make plastic of. And then I saw this old man working with plants, and he was saying, like the samurai, they used to make these shirts with plants because that plant is a pharmaceutical plant that helps wounds to heal. And when the samurai used it and they were wounded in battle, they realized that wounds heal faster if you wear indigo shirts. And at that, I was like, pew, 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 just things like, I'm like, hang on, are you telling me we took something out of our products that supports our health and replaced it with something that challenges our health? And that to me was just sort of like, hey, something's just going wrong. And either I'm crazy or the world is crazy. And I spoke to a few people who work in like textile industry. And at that time, I was working in a healthcare industry, making, working in oncology, actually, oncological software company. And I spoke to some people in textiles, and I just realized they all know. They're like, yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, but people don't really know, and and I was like, come on, like we could work with. I mean, how wouldn't there be a market for plant dye textiles? Why, if I tell this my friends, everybody's excited, and they're like, yeah, but it's kind of difficult. It costs also a bit more, and the technology, blah blah. And I was like telling my then girlfriend or fiance, I mean, now we're married and with kids, but sort of as this thing happened, our relationship got deeper. But I was like, I mean, either I'm just gonna have this, let this go, or I have to like really start talking about this and see if people care. And then she said, like, hey, why don't we make an Indiegogo campaign? And we just say, like, hey, we make textiles with plants, with plant dyes, just like in the old days, just like the samurais. And so we went from there, and luckily the campaign went really well, which to me showed that there's enough people interested. Then we had the problem to actually have to make textiles, which was like, and we really invested time and money and energy, and we have a patent now as well on like the production process because you want it to be color fast. And now, I think a few years ago, I mean, we have started to have collaborations with hospitals now, and we have a very cool cooperation with Upstate Medical University, and hopefully soon an NIH-funded trial. And we've published now studies also with researchers from Cambridge University. We had for a long time the certification from the National Eczema Association as I think, the only bed sheets or the only textile company. And now we are also an FDI, so we are FDA compliant. The FDA doesn't really approve things, so it's not FDA approved, it's FDA compliant, but we're the only textile in this FDA compliancy space. Because what we basically say is our consumers are not people who are like, oh, I like sustainable. Like, these are people who are like, no, I have super sensitive skin. I'm allergic, I have eczema, TSW. We have a lot of people with MCS, multiple chemical sensitivities. It's where just where the faintest amount of synthetics just cause like very intense reactions. And those people in the millions that exist like that. I mean, just skin issues, that's I think 40 million Americans. Sometimes people say 1 in 4 people, but it's a huge amount of people. And granted, most people don't connect textiles with skin health, but more and more do. And the link is pretty clear in the literature. And so I don't know. That's just where how we got here, and I'm still. It's been well, soon it's 10 years. I was very passionate about it. I think it's really important to talk about this, and I just enjoy making this.
That's great. So, for those who are listening who don't know, what's the difference between your bedding material and other bedding material out there? What makes it special and what makes it FDA compliant?
So that's two different things. But what makes it special is we are pretty much the only company that uses plant dyes. So a lot of other companies say, "Hi, we are organic," or we use whatever bamboo, blah blah something, but they still use a synthetic color, and the synthetic colors are made from petrochemicals, even if they call them low impact or whatever fancy word it is. But we actually use a plant color. And that is a huge difference. And I just can give you one number that I think really, made me click as well. So there's a study that was done in Europe, in Italy, where they specifically looked, if you have contact dermatitis, you're reacting to things that touch your skin. How likely is it that the dye versus any other ingredient causes the reaction? And it's 80% of the people that have a reaction to textiles react to the dye and not to any other things. That sometimes companies say, oh, we have whatever, this and this, blah blah blah, something, treatment, silver, whatever it is, but the dye is a pretty aggressive, irritating chemical. So and that is the main difference between us and other companies. Is other companies also say, oh, we're all natural, and usually when you say 100% cotton on the label, on a t-shirt, whatever, that refers to the fiber, not the whole product. They legally don't have to disclose that, which is why it's so confusing for consumers. But the dye, even though it can be 20% of the weight of the product or more, it's not considered an ingredient. It's a treatment, which legally that's just legally how it is, but logically it doesn't make any sense. That would be like when you have the ingredients in food and you would say, only if it's made from plants, it's an ingredient. If it's made from animals, it's a treatment or whatever. So that is the main difference between us and our companies, is that we use plant dyes, and we do pretty much use. I mean, you use some. We're going to, not yet. We want to use mineral dyes in the future as well, but that's the main difference. And what makes it FDA compliant? Well, is mostly and so one is you have to register with the FDA, Two is you have to pay a lot of money to the FDA annually. But since we make other medical products, so I'm not just doing AIZOME, but I have a medical device company, so I'm very familiar with making medical products. And then, well, I think what's very important for consumers is we need to have very strict internal controls and understanding the ingredients that we have. A textile company doesn't need to know at all what is in their product. A textile company can literally just buy it from a guy and sell it, and that's it. Like if somebody comes and say, "Hey, we found whatever chemical in your product that shouldn't be in there," they can always say, "We didn't know. This guy should know." But the problem is, this guy sits somewhere on the other side of the world, so, there's legally nothing you can do about this. And so, when you have these shows where they, test textiles for dangerous chemicals, that's how it always happens. They find all these like dangerous chemicals, from lead in like clothes for children to, of course, all these eczema triggering chemicals in all kinds of textiles. And we basically make ourselves liable by saying, no, we know we have all these documents, we know our suppliers, and we just don't rely on a couple of certificates, but we actually have a full ingredient list, um, you know, full ingredient, pretty much full ingredient list and full understanding to as much as possible as you can, that the same that you would expect from a medical device, something that is used to treat, mitigate, or cure a disease.
That's really helpful that you shared more about it. And so it sounds like what you're saying is that using plant dyes are actually even a step above just organic dyes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
Mhm.
absolutely, so it's something I don't want to say, oh, all these other organic companies are bad, because I generally think anybody that's trying to be better, that's a step in the right direction. But what we do is quite different to just another organic brand. We really take great care that our products are made only from plants. That means that they're also biodegradable, actually biodegradable, because the dyes don't biodegrade. That's something that often people don't think. They say, oh, the cotton t-shirt will biodegrade, but that's not true. Actually, a large percentage of microplastics in the ocean are cotton fibers that are dyed with synthetics, because it basically turns a natural material into something synthetic. So that's a big difference. Yeah, I can proudly say this, but I'm not saying this to say the other companies are bad.
And I really love and really appreciate that even on your website, and I can just share my screen for those who are watching the YouTube version. But even with your website, it's really nice to see like you guys really lay out everything in detail about like you guys have the toxicology report, the antibacterial test, the GOTS certified cotton, and just so many even peer reviewed research and the FDA mention about the device. And so it looks like you guys have a lot of things that are listed.
Yeah, and we this is an ever expanding list. We've done in the beginning, we've done patch testing with our products. This is an antibacterial report, which is also really, really interesting, because a lot of like things that claim they are antibacterial, what they do is they like for example, silver is one of this typical thing in textiles. It just prevents the further increase of bacteria, while indigo actually decreases the amount of bacteria. So indigo is when you wear something, it's indigo, and you sweat a lot, and you just hang it up. It doesn't smell the next day. It literally kills the bacteria, which people think of cosmetic, but it's actually staph bacteria is one of the biggest reasons for hospital-acquired infections, HAIs, and it causes a lot of disease and causes a lot of issues. And indigo kills specifically Staphylococcus bacteria. So there's an ever ongoing stuff that we post on this, and I always sometimes think like indigo planta is almost like the gift that keeps on giving. Just recently, we met a doctor, and they were talking about testing indigo or indigo t-shirts, and because there's studies on like how it prevents UV light from going through, and it seems that the indigo dye particularly is a very great filter for stuff. And that's something really new. I like never came across this, but plantas are really amazing, Abby. And I think one part why I'm so excited about this is because traditionally many cultures knew that. They just observed plants and they would just like test. And indigo was used in so many different cultures where people just realize, oh, this is a great dye to put into textiles, because it's really health supporting for different reasons. And it kind of, I love this with plant dyes, that it connects us back to that time and really understanding materials, and we make something that's better for the planet, for the environment, but it has huge benefits for people wearing it.
That's great. The indigo dye that you guys use, is that the same as indigo powder when they can put it on their skin and it can actually help improve the rashes?
It depends which indigo powder, but if you mean indigo powder that you use dermatologically,
Yeah, yeah.
well then that must be the same.
Mm.
So indigo you can use indigo ointments for treatment of wounds. There you can, in Chinese medicine, they use indigo tea as well to drink, and yeah, and the only indigo that's completely different is the one that all the textile companies say, hey, we dye our jeans with indigo. Well, they use synthetic indigo, and that's very different. That's a nerve toxin. If you drink that, you'll die within an hour. So, but it's also blue, but they call it indigo, and people think of indigo just as a color, but indigo really is a plant that, that grows
Hmm.
in
So
places.
how much more expensive is using like indigo dyes or plant dyes versus other
Yeah.
organic dyes or conventional dyes?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think that's one of the things that drives me so nuts, because in the beginning I thought it's going to be way more expensive, but I thought it's just worth it. And now I'm coming to realize, like, it is actually not that much more expensive to use plant dyes. It's like cents, it's like fractional. And for big companies though, that make millions and millions of garments, if you tell them, hey, we're using a plant dye that will increase your cost by 5%. They're like, that's crazy. 5%? Nobody cares. Like, because um, yeah, I think it's really sad, but it's really the reality of textile production. Is there's this race to the bottom to use absolutely the cheapest materials, and for people who care about their health. The fact that now almost all textiles are made from polyester, it's terrible. It's also terrible for the environment. But that's also something that happened in the last 20 years of like, hey, just phase out natural materials and just use polyester. And then sometimes it's marketed as like whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's just a cheaper material. And it's the same with plant dyes. It is more expensive, but it's like, to a consumer, you go like, I'm paying $50 for a t-shirt or whatever, 30, $20. Like, I should be worth it to pay, like, you're literally just paying 30% for the natural dye, and all the rest is marketing, shipping, blah, blah, blah. So it shouldn't be more expensive for the consumer, and really it isn't. But as long as we don't have economies of scale, and small companies like us, we make like indigo dye t-shirts, but we make a couple of thousand t-shirts, we have to fly to the dye, blah blah. So that is reflected in the price, of course, because we make much less. But if we were to make, I don't know, a million t-shirts, like the prices would drop significantly. And that's one thing too. I love talking with you, because to me, it's just a matter of time that big companies will start also using plant dyes. It just makes more sense.
For sure. So can you tell me more about what you were sharing earlier about the antibacterial properties with indigo dye and the plant dyes? Because I know your graph on your website is showing that it can actually help inhibit Staph aureus, and I know for so many of us that's what drives the eczema. So I think so many people would be interested in hearing more about
Yeah,
you share more.
exactly. So this is a study that we made in Japan on the light blue indigo. And so basically what we wanted to see is, we know that if you use it as an ointment, it accelerates wound healing. We also have done a study with the University of Cambridge in the UK, that's somewhere on the homepage, where we did that on skin with the ointment. But then the question is, okay, well, can this property be transferred into a textile? Because that's really sort of the claim, that the samurais got hit by a arrow, and because it went through the indigo shirt, this would kind of disinfect the skin and the wound would heal faster. So then we contracted a lab who did this study, and the study that you see here is an antibacterial. B is, I think, an antibacterial silver bedding. A is just a standard textile, and C is our bedding. And what you see, that just within hours, hang on, I think I mixed it up. A is our product, our bedding, B is silver, and C is a standard textile. So what you see with C is that if you sleep on your pillow, your drool, whatever, there is enough things for bacteria to grow, and then they really thrive in the environment. Well, what silver does, it kind of limits the growth, like it just limits the growth. But silver does also come with some negative side effect, which is why it's not really used anymore in textiles. And then we look at like the plant indigo, and what it actually does, it kills off the bacteria. And you notice that immediately if you sleep in our bed sheets in a hot night right now, and you leave the bedroom, and it's really this sweat and people been sleeping in a room, and you take a shower and you come back, you just notice it, just like the smell is almost gone. And also notice this with t-shirts. And where this matters the most, Abby, I think for people with eczema, is on a pillowcase. Because we spend, so much money, or people spend so much money on creams, on treatments, and so on. And then they go and lie down on a pillow case, which is full of synthetics. It's almost always going to have a synthetic dye on that. And don't forget, the dye is really one of the most irritants. And then not seldom, there's polyester, plastic, there are other things in there that cause friction and irritation. And that's where you rub your face on 8 hours every day. And then most likely you're not going to wash it every day, which makes it worse. It means when you come back the next day, there's even more bacteria on there. And when you use indigo, particularly, it slowly kills you come back the next day, the bacteria is decreased, I don't remember percentage, like by 95%, to a large degree, it's off. And this is extremely useful for people with eczema. And as I mentioned before, we are working on a trial in hospitals as well to reduce hospital-acquired infections where just staph bacteria also grows and really makes people sick.
That's great. That's great that you guys are doing so many things. I had one person who commented, Linda, who asked, "How about silk pillowcases for face eczema? How does that compare to yours?"
Yeah, good question. So I think silk pillowcase companies are always really good at advertisement. And so one thing that silk does, it's creates less friction. And the friction is one thing that also is bad for, it just causes irritation. But other than that, a lot of silk pillowcases do undisclosed have polyester in there, and not made 100%, which not all, but some. And for sure, there are some that are used and use mulberry silk, but that's not real silk, but like materials called silk. But pretty much all, and I mean, we've checked this many times, all silk pillowcases use synthetic dyes. And then I can just go back to the fact synthetic dye, like this neon color on your pillowcase, that's made from oil and from coal tar. That's the same material as a plastic bag. And those things, like you wouldn't sleep on a plastic bag, but with that synthetic coloring, that's essentially what you sleep on. And even if maybe one of the ingredients, the silk, is potentially good or reduces friction, it's kind of in my view, it's obvious how you're putting one good ingredient on a bad ingredient, and then you say, hey, we solved all your problems. I'm always the guy who's like, let's go back to the natural things, don't mess too much with nature. And we use cotton, but we weave it in a very special way. When you touch our products, you think it's silk. It's a sateen. It's called sateen. It's a sateen weave where you just have a very, very smooth weave type. It's very thick and feels very good. And it basically feels like silk, so you have very little irritation. And just to break it down very simply, the three things that cause irritation on your skin is mechanical irritation, which is friction, which I would say silk pillowcases deal with. And the second one is pathogenic irritation, which is all the bacteria and so on. And that's not like silk pillowcases have a lot of bacteria on there. After one night, your drool or whatever. And then the third one is chemical irritation. Those three are the irritations people get from textiles. And with our product, it's kind of it's perfect in each category, and silk is basically good in one category.
That makes a lot of sense, and thanks for describing that in more detail as well. I think that's really helpful
Yeah.
for people to know.
I
And what
hope
about?
it's not nerdy or boring.
Oh no, I find it so interesting because bedding and material is such a big thing these days. What about if someone only has like the GOTS certification, for example? Because that's one of the highest standards of certification
Yeah.
as well.
So not to be too like nerdy, but I think Gods. So again, Gods, Oekotex, they're great. They're much better than nothing. But my opinion is, and the opinion of many other people is, it's a pretty low bar to clear. If I was I don't know, dictator of the world, I would just say like that's minimum standard. If you don't have that, why do you even, how can you even like sell textiles to children? Um, Oekotex does check for 300 chemicals. And they check for the 300 most common known toxic chemicals, which is great. But if you know that there are up to 10,000 different chemicals used in the textile industry, the loopholes are massive. If you've heard of PFAS, which is now very much in the news, have you heard of PFAS?
Yes.
So PFAS, I think Oekotex just included this last year, or let it be 2 years ago. But like sort of they kind of like just catching up with sort of the latest thing, which again in my mind is just like, yeah, it's better than nothing, but it's not a very high bar. And then same goes a little bit with GOTS. GOTS is more like GOTS they check on each level for using the material. So without sounding too dramatic, I think if you worry and you find something that's good, like GOTS and Oekotex are a great sign that you're buying something that's most likely much better than something else. However, we neither have GOTS or Oekotex because of my little beef with, I think their standard is too low and what we do is much higher. And also we have to have all these internal documentation ourselves as an FDA requirement, while with Oekotex or GOTS, it's basically easy for companies because they just pay for the certification and they do the check and they don't need to know what's going on. So I hope this is a sort of balanced, nuanced answer. It's a good thing, so do look for it. But if you are really a textile nerd or sort of a health nerd, I just want you to remember that this is not the end of the story. It's a good first step, but we have to, like, as an industry, and so we have to push for higher standards.
For sure. And I really do love and appreciate that your standards are so high. And that also makes sense why it's the first FDA compliant bedding material as well. So, what makes your production process look different too? Because you mentioned GOTS only checks for like 300 of those. Is it chemicals or?
Yeah, Oekotex, they check at the final product stage for 300 chemicals, and then they go like, okay, they're not there, no formaldehyde, good to go. GOTS checks was the cotton grown organic, was the dye, was the dye process done in a certain way? And here, organic is, you also have to understand they allow petrochemicals if they are used in a certain way, which they think is less harmful. And so they basically have rules and regulation how you can sort of the industry joke sometimes is you can GOTS certify a bicycle if you follow all the rules. It's possible. So it doesn't mean there are no synthetics in there. It just means they're probably most likely less harmful synthetics. But I'm a bit of a purist. I think less bad doesn't mean good. It's still kind of bad, but like less bad. And we really try to make something that's good. We don't use any of these synthetic chemicals that even come into question of whether they are potentially bad or not.
That's great. How can you make sure that there's no PFAS and no microplastics as well?
Well, yeah, so I mean, this is kind of for us the core thing is we are very, very strict with our suppliers. We have only really one and maybe a second supplier with the t-shirt now, and that we really have to go there several times, long relationship with them. And we always, when we first meet a supplier, we say, hey, we're this company, and then they always say, yeah, we have Oekotex and GOTS and very organic. And then I do always the same thing. I open my computer. I show, some of our customers, for example, with TSW. You're familiar with TSW?
Yeah.
Yeah, so with TSW, so like this is one of our customers. So we are making textiles not for people who care about your organic certification or sustainability, blah. Like we our customers have really severe issues. So even if you hide something from us, they will notice. Like it will come out. And people, especially with multiple chemical sensitivity, I mean, these are people if they wear a sock and it has just one tiny nylon thread in there, the next day they will have a red line exactly on that area. So we basically tell them like, if you had to cheat us, we'll find out like one way or the other. And we also, we have customers that are burn victims that have, no microbiome, no skin. So this is kind of how we frame it. And honestly, this 98% of all manufacturers are out the moment we start talking like this. So we have, we have a very small pool size of companies that can work with in the first place. And then we are very much we're trying to understand what finisher are you using, what forming agent are you using, you know. And then sometimes they say use this brand, and we need to know what is that brand, what is in that brand, and then sometimes they don't know, and we have to find out from the brand what it is. So it's really difficult for us to do that. And these are, I would say, the smaller things. What is easier for us, obviously, is the main ingredient other than the cotton is the plant dye. The cotton, we used organic unbleached cotton for the longest time, which by the way is also really hard to just get unbleached cotton, which is so ironic. You would think like, hey, unbleached should be easier to get, but 99.99% of all cotton is bleached right away because all companies want to have bleached because bleach takes is easier to process, and now we want to have the raw unbleached organic cotton. And we've moving now with some products to regenerative organic cotton, which is let's put it simply 10 steps above just organic. It's a much better way of organic growing cotton. And I think in the shirts, the t-shirt I'm wearing, and some of no, all the blankets, and I think the new batch of bedding which we are making right now, that's also regenerative organic. So did I answer your question, or am I just lost in blah blah? I think you were asking me you were
That's
asking me how
okay.
do we know.
Well,
And then
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
of
How
course.
do we know? Yeah.
And we do, and we obviously have to do batch testing as well, because there can also be like sort of unintentional contamination, somewhere at the port, I don't know, something sprayed and so on. So we do batch testing as well. But I mean, we are really pain to work with for suppliers. We're very, very annoying.
I guess it also really shows that you guys have high standards as well.
Yeah, we have high standards because I mean, this is really what I feel passionate about. It doesn't exist and it should exist, and it shouldn't be so difficult. How it's so difficult just to get an unbleached cotton t-shirt. I mean, you can just go online and say unbleached cotton. It's really difficult, but why is it so difficult to say, hey, thank you, I don't want to have bleach. I don't want to have a potentially irritating chemical. And when you go to, hey, I want to have a plant dyed t-shirt, there are so few companies that are doing this. And plant-dyed bedding, as far as I know, we're the only company that does that. And I think like this is crazy. It shouldn't be so difficult.
And how many other companies would you say are doing something similar to you guys, or even doing the raw, unbleached cotton?
So there are a few companies, and I can't really talk about how strict they are in their process. But one company that I like, I think they have cool designs, is called Industry of All Nations. They work, as far as I understand it, with very small traditional clothes manufacturers in South America and in India and so on. And they have very cool designs. They're a bit pricey, but cool. I have several of their products. There are some sheep wool companies that there's one in Germany called Nordwolle, Northern Wool. They're very cool. All of their products are undyed, or I think they have some dyed, but they work, for example, with different natural sheep wool color, and they make stuff like this. Um, there is a company that I've met the owners personally called Cottonique. They have a lot of unbleached cotton products, and they also have some dyed products. But the cotton I recommend on the unbleached cotton products for them. I mean, they're really good quality and they're strict. They take the stuff really serious. From a medical perspective, that's different to many other companies. They also think of this as a medical product. Yeah, and I think there are a few more companies. I hear every now and then I hear somebody's coming up, and when I'm looking at the homepage, I'm like, "Ah, I'm not 100% sure if this is really, but I don't know, of course, what they're doing, but it's still like maybe a handful. I mean, we are still very niche.
For sure. And for those who are listening who might not be familiar with the issue with bleached fabric, what would you say the issue is if they do wear like a bleached shirt and they're struggling with rashes?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in general, if you have a your microbiome is struggling and so on, you just kind of want to have something that doesn't interfere with your microbiome. You just want it to just let your skin do the work. Ideally, you'd be just naked, right? Ideally, you would just not put anything on there that can cause any kind of irritation. I mean, bleach is just another, it's just another ingredient or chemical that somehow alters or interacts with your skin biome. And the issue is that when companies basically or engineers just sort of decide that's a safe level, they just go like, yeah, maybe average population, we should be fine. But we are an average, like we all are somewhere on the spectrum. And if you have issues with your skin, you maybe cannot deal with what somebody else can deal with. And I find it with just with bleach, it's just like I think why just put another chemical on there. But you know what, Abby, I want to not just steer people away from everything, because the problem becomes like, what am I gonna do? Like everything's full of chemicals and people just give up. I think there's one very practical tip that I can just say always, always is when you buy something new, wash it. If you have sensitive skin, don't feel silly to wash it 5 times. That's totally fine. At least wash it once. Definitely wash it better to wash it twice or 3 times. If you There's a rule of thumb that every time you wash a textile, 50% of the chemicals that will ever leach out will be washed out. I know, be washed into the environment. It's a whole different story, but so if you wash something 5 times, you've kind of like washed out 99% of the chemicals. Of course, not everything will wash out. If it's made from polyester, that will just stick in there and it will cause other issues. But wash, that's something you can definitely do, and avoid in general polyester or plastics touching your skin.
That's very helpful. Thank you. What other kinds of stories have you heard from your customers or people who have tried your products and your bedding who have eczema and TSW?
Well, that's is one of the things that makes me the happiest when I read these reviews or people call us or they go into the chat. So we give, I think we are the only, no, we can't be the only company, but definitely one of the few companies. We give very generous return policies. Usually we say you have a year to try the product. And we have almost no returns, because the majority of people, just after a few nights, they say, wow, this feels completely different. Most people, even when they open it, they just open it and smell on it, go like, hey, this smells like nothing I've ever smelled. It doesn't smell like synthetic, doesn't have this like synthetic new smell of an iPhone or a car or something. It just smells like a agricultural product. It just smells like wheat or like bread or something, right? You have that natural smell. And we have a lot of people. I mean, yes, last week we've had a very cool email from a customer. He told me I can say his name, so I'm going to say his name. Ken Jensen from Canada, older gentleman who has MCS. So again, MCS is a really, really terrible condition in which you just become too sensitive for almost any kind of chemicals. It's kind of a PTSD. If you've been exposed to too much chemicals, one point your body just can't deal with anything anymore. And he said this is the first product in over 10 years that he could just use right out of the box. And he said like it's a miracle. And this makes me really happy, because I'm not making this to be another sustainable wow brand, but I think there's a real need to have natural, better products that on one hand are also helping people who have disease, And I'm quite sure also that they prevent disease. You've spoken with Ian Myers,
Yeah.
doctor. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of studies that show that many of these chemicals also seem to be a pathway that you eventually you develop something like eczema or any other kinds of, skin or otherwise allergies, health sensitivities. So I do think that this is something that's still difficult to study and understand, but to me it makes sense that these chemicals accumulate, and at one point your microbiome just goes like, I can't deal with this anymore. So we have lots of customers who write really cool stuff, and sometimes, honestly, I think that's placebo effect. We had a woman who said like the doctor said she can't get pregnant, and she said she got pregnant in our sheets. I'm like, oh, it's very cool. I'm quite sure we can't claim that as us, but it makes me still happy.
That's funny. Yeah, for sure. It always feels nice whenever you hear that someone got better or their skin healed as well. And I'm sure that with Izome bedding, the other thing that it can also contribute to helping the environment as well at the same time, or it's better
Yeah,
for the environment.
it's a huge thing. So a couple of numbers that I think mind-boggling. Every year, humanity produces enough textile to make a 6-mile long sheet and is wrap it entirely around the planet. And we make this every year, and all of it is not non-biodegradable. 37% of the ocean plastics are not from water bottles. They are of textile origin. So it's one of the largest contributors to ocean plastic. So it's a huge contributor. And if you dye a cotton fiber with plants, sorry, with synthetic dyes, it becomes non-biodegradable. So it is kind of textiles are weird because they're so close to us that we don't really think about it. And we've been really conditioned in the last 20 years to think of it almost as a disposable product. But it's really a product every person uses. Every person on the planet uses textiles, and at a fast and faster speed, we just use more and more and more textiles. And there are stats that people just wear. The average wear of a new textile is 3 or 4 times because it's never used again. So that's a huge environmental problem, and I also think it's a huge health problem because the newer textiles are, and the more synthetic they are, the more chemicals leach into our body and cause all kinds of funky stuff with our skin biome.
For sure. And also, out of curiosity, because you guys are such a unique company that is at the forefront and your standards are so high as well. So, what is your biggest challenges, especially in this market? And, really, especially when it comes to building a sustainable and health focused product as well in today's market?
Do you mean what do you mean? Is this like a business challenge or as a product
Can
challenge
be
or
either.
so? I mean, product challenge is just we continuously we want to what we say is true, right? So we have to control the suppliers, we have to, do batch testing. And if we want to develop a new product, it's really complicated because we can't just buy something that's out there and drop ship it. But we really have to go into the detail. Okay, if we make pants, what rubber are we gonna use? Is it natural rubber? But what's the origin of the so that's also a reason why we have so little products, because it's really difficult, it takes really long time. And the other challenge, business challenge, I think sometimes one of the challenges is if everybody says, "Hey, we are the natural textile company," and then we are like, "But hang on, that's us. Like you're using petrochemical colors. Like, how are you natural?" But they're saying the same thing as us, but we're like, hang on, but so what we sometimes I find it a bit tricky then to go like it seems like everything has been said about sustainability in textiles and health and so on, that that sometimes I feel we're just saying the same thing. And I would say, yeah, that can be a challenge. But luckily, there's a I think it's a great time right now that a lot of people are starting to ask way more questions. Our companies the last 2 years have been just incredible. When it comes to coverage by media, we've won countless awards from different organizations where they just recognize, oh, that's something unique. And Yeah, so I do think it's a good time, but I would still say it's challenging. Like when we say natural textiles, and people go like, yeah, like, and then they name whatever blank another company. I'm like, yeah, I don't think they're natural.
For sure. I'm sure that that has happened many times before. A- And so, for you guys, what do you feel like is the future of where wellness and textiles are heading, and bedding too?
So yeah, I hope utopia that I hope is just we have a shift, a cultural shift towards human-centered design thinking for products, that we make products and go like, hey, if I make this and it's used by a human, how will it health-wise benefit this human? And then the next step is that you consider what do I have to extract from the soil to make that, and how am I extracting this? And when the product will not be used anymore, how will it just return back to nature? This sort of cradle to cradle thinking. And that's some philosophy that luckily I see is more and more developing. And it's something I really feel strong about. We want, that I love regenerative farming practices where, you farm a product in a way that it actually regenerates the soil, and when the product is used on people, it brings them comfort, benefits, supports their health. And the moment it's not used, it cannot be used anymore. You can, put it in your backyard and it would just fall apart and, grow into a tree or flowers or whatever. So that's the future I see. And people think like it's a little bit cuckoo bananas or a little bit hippy dippy, but what's the alternative? Is we have more ocean plastics, we keep polluting, we make everything disposable, we don't know how to clean it. Like we cannot continue doing this without destroying the planet. And what I think and what my philosophy is also, like, we're destroying our own health. I think it's very good when people think about their own health first, because if they truly have buy better things for themselves, and are not just duped into some marketing stuff, they also buy better things for the planet, or they also use better things for the planet. I think the planetary health and personal health is actually very connected.
For sure. I completely agree with that. And that's yeah, very helpful to hear. So we're near the end now. And so one of the last questions is, if someone with eczema is listening today and they're struggling with their sleep, maybe because of itchy skin or the rashes, what's the one thing that you really want them to know about your bedding, or the one thing that you really want to say?
You will love it. I promise you will love it. I sweat so much right now. I'm in Munich in Germany. It's so hot, and I'm so happy I'm sleeping in my own sheets, because it really helps with the temperature regulation. It really absorbs the sweat and let it evaporate, so you sleep very, very dry. Especially in hot summers, you sleep sweaty, itchy. The if you think about it, what makes the itch worse? It's the synthetic material. If you were to sleep in a plastic bag, which is made from the same things as synthetic dyes and synthetic bedding, it itches, it's smelly, there's bacteria growing on that, and it really changes when you switch to a more natural bacteria. I admit, our products aren't the cheapest for sure, but we have very long. I think we have a 10-year manufacturing warranty. You will not buy a lot from us, I promise you. You can keep these products, you can inherit it to your children. You keep it forever, and it will give you better sleep every night from the first time that you sleep in it. To we have customers who tell us, I bought your product 7 years ago and I'm still very happy with it. So it's really a very sensible, mature adult investment into better sleep and better health. And you also have to think, if you sleep better, you're just a better person. Like, you have more energy to do the things that you like and so on. And don't have polyester sheets. Don't have these cheap sheets where you save a couple of dollars and it just makes you itchy and uncomfortable. Is that good?
And yeah, yeah, that's really
Yeah.
helpful. Actually, one quick question before we close. So, like, what about with activewear? Because like a lot of companies that produce activewear, it's really expensive for some of them. Like pants, polyester pants can range from like 60 to like 100 something dollars. So, are you basically saying it's not worth it? It's really cheap products, really cheap material,
Yes.
mm, but they just make the price so high.
because they spend a lot of money on marketing.
That makes a lot
It's
of sense.
polyester is, I mean, what is polyester?
Mm-hmm.
It's plastic.
Mm.
It's just plastic. A lot of the materials are waste products from the oil industry. The one thing that polyesters or that you can do with plastic is you can make it very stretchy. That's really difficult with natural materials. So that's a feature that makes that's a feature. And then neon colors, you can do very well with synthetics. You can't do very well with plants. But I mean, kind of that's it. Like I think if you active wear, there's very great hemp products, cotton. Even though I know there's some wool active wear as well, because I think cashmere wool can be woven very thin. So it goes very far away to what people think is active wear. But again, if you think, hey, I'm gonna exercise or gonna meditate, but you wear petroleum that's from some oil field somewhere, it's kind of weird, right? Or people go in nature, ooh, I want to be in contact with nature, but you're literally wearing a plastic bag that, by the way, is also shedding microfibers into the environment. It's kind of, we're so conditioned to think, we've seen all the images and it's just what we believe is the right thing to do. But if you really think about it, if we really deeply think about the materials, I think most people go like, yeah, it's kind of like weird that we are so addicted to like these plastic materials, and they're not really good for the environment, and they're also not really good for us. And it's really just that we, have seen all the images and so on. But I don't want to poo-poo these other companies. I don't like them, but it's just, yeah, that's
What
just
are
what
your
it is.
favorite activewear companies? Do you have any?
I am like the opposite of active. I'm like a very sedentary person. Like, I've been to gym a few times. So to ask me about active wear, I also don't know anything about football, and despite being German. Like, there's a couple of things I just have no idea. So I really don't know anything about activewear. The only thing I can say is I've been to Ventura, to Patagonia, and I've met a few people from Patagonia. So I don't know if that counts as activewear. Maybe no, that's like more hiking wear, right?
I think so. I'm not too familiar with that brand.
Yeah, so I just think they have good ethics. They know that they use a lot of synthetics and they're very open about it, which is something that I appreciate, because I don't the solution is not to say we don't have synthetics anymore tomorrow, but it's like first admitting what is synthetic and what isn't. And Patagonia is one of the companies that are very open about this and about trying to use more. I mean, one of the core things is in the founder is very adamant that he wants to shift the company to using plant dyes in the future.
That's
And
great.
they're doing experiments and so on. So that's very cool. So I recommend them for their ethics and for their openness. Um,
That's
yeah.
great. Well, and where can our listeners learn more about and also try out the Izome products for themselves?
Well, you can go to aizome-textiles.com, and that's AIZOME-textiles.com. Or I think you can also type AIZOME.me. And we have we have a lot of stuff on Instagram. We always talk with great people like you, Abby, where we learn more about other products, other companies, stuff. We often share also how we make things and whatever we find interesting. And so I think our Instagram or TikTok are a pretty cool place. Of course, on our homepage, we have a blog that I sometimes write stuff. And we can also always call us or chat with us. We're all real people. We don't have any AIs on our homepage. Well, actually, if you go on a chat, you'll talk with us. And yeah, or maybe this is also my call to go. The baby's crying. I don't know if you hear it.
I hear your little one crying, yeah. But
Yeah.
but that's really helpful. And also I put the link in the description as well in case any of you just want to click it. You can also do so as well. And if any of you want a 10% off coupon code, you can use the code Abby for 10% off.
Very important. If you listen to this and you love Abby as much as we do, then please use the Abby code. I think I really love working with people like you, and we're really happy to have affiliates that work with us and help us to communicate what we feel passionate about.
For sure. And I also really love natural products too. So it's so great to really have learned about what you guys do. And I hope that more people continue to hear about it as well. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much, everyone, and hope that you have a great day. And don't forget to check out the link in the description to check out AIZOME Bedding, and you can use the coupon code ABBY as well for 10% off. I hope this was helpful, and take care. Have a great day.